Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of catching up with Bill Condron, CEO of The Granite Group, based in Boston with locations all over the Northeast. As you will hear, Bill is one of those leaders who is super passionate about company culture and driving the success of his associates. Culture is not defined by a ping pong table in the break room. It is the daily practice of values, doing the right thing by your associates and customers, even when nobody else is looking. The Granite Group is an aggressively growing company. This means that they are constantly in the talent acquisition and promotion business. There is an art and science to this part as well. Finding the balance between scale and culture is always on the forefront of Bill's mind. I enjoyed getting a few minutes to catch up with this dynamic leader, and I hope you do too. This episode is brought to you by my friends at Moblico. Today, there are more connected devices in the US than there are people. The mobile experience has greatly changed your customers' and employees' behaviors and expectations, including how they communicate and exchange information at home, play, and work. Your customers expect faster service, convenience, and relevancy more than ever before. From custom mobile apps to robust mobile messaging solutions, Moblico provides the most comprehensive end-to-end mobile communication and outbound marketing solution to the wholesale distribution industry. Check out what Moblico has to offer at www.moblicosolutions.com. That's MOBLICO solutions.com. And be sure to let them know you heard about them on the Distribution Talk podcast. All right. Hey, Bill, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give us a little history lesson? I know you grew up in the family biz, but if you wouldn't mind taking us through that full progression.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So I'm actually third generation of our family business. It's a bit of a misnomer, though, because my father and my grandfather started the business together.
Okay.
There was a supply house for sale in the classified ads in Worcester, Mass., the town where I grew up. And my grandfather was in the textile business, dyeing business at that time in the early 70s with his two brothers. He got out of that business looking for something, found us in the classified ads and convinced his new son-in-law and my dad to come in with him. And they knew nothing more than how to flush a toilet. And even more borderline insane, they had no money. They had no capital. So they borrowed 100% from the bank, bought a supply house in Worcester in 72. And the rest, as they say, is history. So
that's crazy. Oh, man.
It is. Yeah. And then my dad, he built it through a lot of pretty aggressive acquisitions through the 80s and 90s. I would never thought I'd come to work in this business.
Most of us don't ever think that we'd ever come into the business.
Ever. No. You're either born into it or stupid. I happen to be both. So what happened was I was working in New York at the time and wanted to come back to New England. I tell the story like my dad and I had a conversation about coming back. And I was like, he'd be like, start in the warehouse, works well. You work your way up to becoming a branch manager. And I was like, listen, Dad, I'm not signing a lifetime contract here.
Right.
I can do other things. And he's like, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm not offering you a lifetime contract. So I was like, all right.
Yeah,
we already talked salary.
I'm glad we got that settled.
Totally. So then it started. And I started in 2001. I was actually on a corner picker, putting away some LK sinks in our warehouse when I heard over the radio the planes hitting towers. So that's like my second week.
Oh, wow.
And then worked my way up through, eventually did manage our branch. And then from there, kind of continued to learn the business. And it's been a great run. The people and the industry, as you know as well, and many people listening, it really is a great industry filled with great people on all sides, our coworkers, our manufacturers, our customers.
So what was your favorite job growing up? What did you like the best?
I'm glad you brought it up because it's an easy answer. Branch manager, far and away. Managing our branch in Worcester was the most satisfying because it was so tangible. Like at the end of the day, you hit a button, printed a report, and you knew did for the day, and you had your team. And it was I just really enjoyed it. And I say this to business all the time. Here I was at that point, probably, 28 years old. And I'm managing a branch, but I'm running a P&L, managing an inventory. I'm dealing with customers, coworkers. So like you're running a business, right? And you go to these bigger companies, you'll be years before you even get close to a P&L, right? P&L responsibility. And here I had it at a really young age. So branch manager was by far and away the most satisfying, and I think the most important role in our company today.
It's interesting that you say that. I interviewed another lady. Actually, I went down to do a private branch manager training with her company. And one of the first things out of her mouth, when she assembled this group is, you are the most important role in our organization. And that really struck me. And I would often say that they are probably given the least amount of tools when they take over that responsibility as well.
You're absolutely right. See, here's the thing. So I was talking to somebody one day. They said, what's the most important job in your company? Without missing a branch manager.
Yeah.
They said, no, so that's the position you give the most training to. And I was like, ooh.
Oh, it's just
like a kick in the teeth. I was like, no. Yeah. Right. So we started branch manager training. From that, I need to continue to stay on that because it's a super important role and you got to give them the support, especially when people are moving on and moving up into the role. So
absolutely, Bill. I think probably about, now 6 or 7 years ago, I transitioned from doing primarily inventory management training to branch manager training, frankly, because of what you just said. We have an inside sales person. They're really, really good at it. And let's say, hey, let's anoint you branch manager. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And I hope you don't sink the ship, but you can be the branch manager. And that just always stuck with me. And I thought, man, we've got to give them a fighting chance. We've got to help them understand what their role is.
100%. There's a huge void there. We used to do it. We just throw you to the deep end of the pool and hope you swim. Right. And then if you didn't, we were like, oh, well, we didn't give you the tools to teach you how to swim. So how could we expect you to do? So we've gone back and really filled that back in because it's so important, because it is the most important role of the company, especially if, in every distribution company, you can't just hold an all hands meeting. You get everyone in the same room. You can't do that because we have so many locations that are far flung. So it's really important that the person on the front lines, that's really your leader there out in the field, really does understand and get the support they need to do their jobs really well and lead their teams on a local level.
And I think it's amazing, as you alluded to, that we put people in this position that are fairly young and they have responsibility for people that are considerably older than they are, upwards of 2 decades older than they are. And it's sometimes tough to relate to those people.
Totally. And how do you strike that balance of respecting that senior leadership that knows senior knowledge, yet also with the people you're trying to bring into your team? So it's a balance, and it's made a lot harder because there has to come from a position of respect on both sides. And that's not an easy skill to just kind of come up. It's got to be taught and honed over time.
Oh yeah. And it's incredibly painful for that individual when they don't have that training. Literally when I was probably 31 or something like that, and I was managing a location, and again, younger people, older, and oh my God, I was so frustrated. It was just really, really difficult. Unfortunately, I ran into a researcher. She specialized in generational differences and working with generations and whatnot. Her name is Claire Rains. And she just happened to live in Denver, and I went over to her office. She handed me her book, and it was such an epiphany. But this is a tough role. This is absolutely a tough role.
The tough and the most important.
They really are that cultural face of your organization to the individuals in that branch. As you said, you've got many locations, and they can all take on a little different flavor. But if they're not carrying the torch of the culture of the organization, then you're going to have the one out on the island here. And this is going to be a tough one to keep in.
Yeah. And you bring it up because I think every company approaches it differently. And the way we approach it is, when you become a manager, we say, okay, here are the sidelines. The sidelines are, you got to sell what we have. You got to treat your customers right. And you got to take care of your people. Other than that, here's the ball and go play. And that builds that entrepreneurial spirit. So there's many, many successful companies where every location looks the same and feels the same. Ours isn't that way, and we're kind of proud of that. It takes on the kind of ethos of that manager in the local market in a great way. Yeah. Now, sometimes it could be in a poor way, and you have to make a change because the culture isn't being driven through all the way. But many times you'll go into our branches and they look and are laid out a little differently, and every manager looks a little different, but that's themselves, and they're expressing themselves in that local market. Because at the end of the day, the further you get away from the counter, the less valuable you are. Yeah. Right. So in theory, I'm the least valuable person in our organization. And sadly, I think there'd be some people who may agree with that. But,
sure.
Really, so if you start it that way, the truck driver is the most valuable, right?
Yeah,
because they see customers more than anyone. And then who's managing that truck driver? It's the branch manager that's empowering them to feel that way. Because at the end of the day, in all our locations, it says the Granite Group over the top. But in that local market, it's known as like John's Supply House, Aaron's Supply House, right? Courtney's Supply House, Dan's Supply House. That's what it's known as locally. Because they're the ones who know, like, hey, I can text her at the end of the day at 4:30 and that product will be waiting for me, in the bush outside in front of it so I can grab it on my way home. Right? Those little small things, super valuable on the local level where our business really gets done.
So I have to throw this out since you brought it up earlier. Of course, your drivers are the most trained in customer service, are they not?
And I know, right? It's terrible. Like, it's a sad answer. And I get so many of them, it comes to innately. They just know like that customer wants his product there. And it's super valuable because, sure, like you, I trip over Amazon boxes every night I come home, right? We all get deliveries all the time, but we don't know who that is or who delivers them. And whereas with the products we're providing, which are, expensive, technical, can be very bulky, to know that one customer likes that left on the left side of their house under the eave so it doesn't get wet is of value. But it's not small when that customer comes home and all of the cardboard is all wet and it's now unserviceable for them to put in. All those little things matter. And that starts with a truck driver who, to your point, unfortunately, probably innately customer service, not necessarily ones we trained into them. Now, hopefully the service level from, again, circling back, the manager exudes that in his or her branch, and that's where the truck driver picks it up, you hope.
So my favorite job growing up in my family business was driving truck. It was absolutely my favorite. You passed the time very, very quickly. You were on task, loved it, met a whole lot of great people, but also one of the most challenging. You're dealing with points of conflict as you are that face of the company. And if there's a mistake, 100%. You are that first line that's going to get that.
Like you're responsible for a mistake an order writer made a month ago, or a picker made a day ago, or a manufacturer made 6 months ago. But you are the first point of contact there for a frustrated customer, and how they use that. Again, it's why they're so valuable in the value proposition.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely one that I think all of us could shore up a little bit, spend a little more time on that, just as we said.
And to put a fine point on it, they're gone all day.
Yeah.
So like we go around and do quarterly meetings where we go every quarter to every location. We show them, here's how the company's doing. Here's how your branch is doing. Here's how we're working on. It's like a 50-50 shot that a truck driver will even be there at that point. We have a term internally. We say the term is the truck driver test. And we know an initiative, a communication, whatever it is, has fully gotten through the organization when it can pass a truck driver test. And that means you can walk in any location and ask the truck driver, hey, have you heard about this? You're like, oh yeah, I know about that. You're like, okay, we're good. We've got it through the organization.
We actually made it through the whole.
It takes some time. That takes a lot of time and almost like a schizophrenic level of communication. Because you're like, I've said this like 1,000 times, but you got to keep doing it to get it all the way through that organization.
Has it made it to the truck driver test? That's phenomenal. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, good. One of the things we've talked about culture a couple of times, especially in that branch management function, but this is kind of a big passion area for you. Articles that you've given earlier and things online and whatnot. Culture is a huge part of the organization. Could you talk a little bit about where that comes from?
Yeah, it's the thing I'm probably most proud of, which is maybe why we talk about it so much. And we're very, very deliberate about it. So culture doesn't just happen, right? You have to work at it. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive to some people. Like, oh no, it comes from this place of like, it does come from a place inside your organization, but you have to be very deliberate about it and you have to live it. And you can't live it when it feels good. You can't live it only when the sales are strong. You have to live it all the time. And it's a small little ways that just add up and build up. And it's the fact that people know who you are as an organization and where your values are, good days, bad days, always. So we all went through the pandemic and those really scary times back in like the spring of 2020. Remember we were touching packages. It was like crazy, right?
Yeah.
With hindsight, but it was scary times. We were all still working. We're all considered essential. So I'll never forget this. Call it March 25th, just as the whole world's falling apart. I get an email one night from a counter guy of ours in our Burlington, Vermont store. And he's like, my wife is in the hospital with our first child. I can't get in the hospital to see them, but I'm afraid if I come to work, I could get sick and like bring them to my new baby. I'm like, oh my God, this poor kid. We both are fathers. Scary enough, especially the first time, right? In a pandemic, is like, it blows your mind at the stress this poor kid was going through. And I was like, go home, go be with your wife, take the time. Whenever you're ready, you come back. Now, that wasn't something when we did it, we publicized. We just did it because it was the right thing. And through that time, we did a lot of those things because they were just the right thing to do. And I think that you hope that you kind of build that repository within your organization that you're going to do the right thing. And by mistake, you didn't do the right thing. You're going to fix it and make sure you do the right thing moving forward. So, and there's a lot of ways we push that. So I mentioned like the quarterly meetings we do. Another thing we do is town halls. So I go around to about 12 locations a year and we come in around 4:30 in the afternoon, shut the branch down, pay you for your time, pay you for dinner. And in the advance of it, I ask you a couple questions like what's working, What's not working? If you had $1 million, how would you invest it? What would you like to see the company change? So and then we sit and we say, so if the truck driver's there at that point, back to our previous conversation, we say, hey, Jim, you mentioned that you see this report we printed triplicate. Do you think it's useless because we throw out 2 sheets? Say some more about that. So it allows them to be heard. But here's the important part. We listen, we do these meetings. Someone takes notes. I then go into the notes and highlight in red what needs to be followed up on. The notes go to the leadership team.
Okay.
And then the leadership team comes back and goes back to Jim and says, hey, this is why the report has to be rated triplicate. Or, great point, we're going to have it only on print 1 time. But that communication feedback loop is super important.
Nice.
Again, because we're not all in the same room. We can't call an all hands meeting and say, let's all have a drink together and just catch up. You can't do it. You're too far flung. So doing things like that, and then living that inverted org chart where the truck driver is respected at the top of the org chart. And our central distribution center is exactly that. Our central services is what used to be called the corporate office. I hated that term. It's like corporate and bureaucracy just sucks.
Yeah.
So we did a contest online for people, and they said, we have central distribution. Why don't we become central services? So that's what they're now called. And their job in central services, which is, AP, AR, purchasing, all that, their job is to support the branches. The branch's job is to support the customers, right? We think if we're aligned like that, we're in better alignment.
Isn't that amazing? You and I would have never come up with that title, but it's phenomenal. Central services, because that's really that is the inversion of the pyramid. I serve down to the truck driver level.
I serve you, you serve the customers. We're all in the service business, right? So it aligns. And to your point about you and I would have never come up with that. Like, here's a not very insightful kind of like, listen to your people, ask your people for what they think, and they're going to feed you back some great information, some great, some not, but worth listening to. And I think that culture is just, we're pretty deliberate about it. We're proud of it. That's one of the things, if you ever came to see our organization, that's what we try to live every day. And we're not perfect by any stretch, and we make mistakes. But our thing with making mistakes is like, all right, did you do it because you're trying to do the right thing for the customer? Yes. All right, fix it and don't do it again. Let's move on.
Let's learn from our mistakes and move on.
Exactly. But the minute you take their head off for making a mistake, they'll never try again. And then we lose the entrepreneurial spirit that separates us, or that we hope separates us. So I think, again, just coming back to being very deliberate about it when no one's watching and when people are, and doing what you think is right, try to be humble about it, and don't have no assholes. Like, just try that.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, but if you try it and you commit to it, it kind of feeds on itself and becomes a flywheel.
I would agree. Absolutely. Remind me again, how many locations do you all have now?
Just this past month, so in March, we opened our 50th.
50th. Okay. So that is a whole lot of locations that you will have to visit. Now, you're trying to hit them once a year. Is that what you're trying to do with the talk?
No, once a quarter.
Okay.
We go once a quarter. President, COO, or myself is in every location once a quarter, and we rotate around. So
gotcha.
In fact, I just set mine up earlier today that I'll be up in our main branches and throughout the seacoast in usually in about 2 weeks, right around the end of the quarter. And then, so those are the quarterlies. Then we have an annual meeting, which is exactly that. And then on top of that, we do these town halls. And the town halls, I go to our regional directors to begin the year and say, hey, where do you think it would be valuable to do a town hall? They give me about 12. And I go, and that's when we go in at the end of the day and close it, pay them for their time. The quarterlies in our world are very much a monologue. Like, you're just sharing information. You get some questions, but it's in the middle of the day. It's busy.
Gotcha.
The great thing about the town halls is it's a dialogue. It's a two-way conversation where, and I always start like, hey, just because we talk about it, say, don't think it's going to get done. But for instance, last week I was in our branch in Worcester. They're doing great. They're bursting at the seams, so they need more space. And we had a great dialogue about it. We'll follow up on that. I didn't want to leave them with the fact that, hey, now that I've been here, we're going to like literally raise the roof and blow out, like, just, that's not happen.
Exactly. Yeah. We're going to blow out the sides, and we're going to,
and it's what a wonderful issue to have because of how hard you've been working, what you've been doing in the market. We got to attend to it, and it's on the list.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. My younger brother used to go around the locations and do breakfasts. And it was the same type of thing you're talking about. He would get in front of and really just open it up. Anybody, what's going on? What can I do for you? And that was phenomenal.
100%.
Absolutely. Because they could still I think he's at 350 associates in the company now, and still trying to make sure that he has that connection and people feel comfortable with who he is. And that can be hard as you grow. I mean, that absolutely at 50 locations, Bill, that's difficult.
Yeah, it is, but it's super important work, right? Because if you lose that,
it is.
There are certain things like when I talk about strategy within our business, I talk about a big circle and a small circle. The big circle is everything the customer doesn't see. That's getting, better logistically. That's getting better at IT. That's building your infrastructure. That's buying better. That's getting far sharper with how you move logistics around your company, right? But if we stop there, we're racing down path. We can't win. That's Amazon. That's great. We'll never catch up with it, right? We just won't. And that's okay. But if you have that small circle, and the small circle is where your people and your culture, and it's hyper local. That's why the circle's small. And that's where you have your energetic people. That's where you have your empowered people. That's where you have your inverted org chart. That's where all those things happen. And if you have both in balance, I think you can kind of be somewhere where you can have a lane where you're successful. Certainly that's where we're making our bet. But I think that small circle that's where those town halls matter. If you got too big and lost that, then you've lost the special sauce that makes your company who it is.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about a comment that you made, with that individual who was having a baby during a pandemic, and instinctually we want to just do the right thing. We want to say, hey, no problem, take your time, do this. But the larger you get, all of a sudden, there are people that want you to conform and want you to say, well, is it fair over here if you do this here? And I know it was a big frustration for my father as he was exiting the business eventually, but it had gone to a point that I know that was a very difficult thing for him, because earlier on, you just did what you did. We just took care of it. And we didn't worry about vacation days or time or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But as we got bigger, we had to think about things like that. So there's a balance there for sure.
The word you touched on is exactly right. It's a balance. So when my father ran the business, it was very much that triangle where you talk about, like, over here, you have results, and over here you have relationships, and over here you have process, right? And if you have all three in balance, you're good. And my father very much was results oriented, very much unapologetic. And if I added anything, it was to add that relationship focus with our customers and our people. We are both allergic to process, right?
Sure.
We just come to go get it done. Just go get it done. Just go get it done. Yeah, come on, right?
Yeah, just get it done. I don't want to know the details. I really don't.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to ask you how. And that can be great when you're building an entrepreneurial organization.
Yes.
You bring up a fabulous point, though. If you don't build or at least respect those processes, you're going to falter, because you're going to start to repeat yourself and follow arts and things, and your paperwork. So we've tried acutely over the last few years to inject that process without it becoming bureaucratic. And that's the super fine line, right? How do you teach someone how to do something? This is the correct way to do something. This is the correct procedure to follow, without becoming like, oh, I got to read this sheet before I answer the phone and say hello to the customer. So it's a super fine balance there. Yeah, I would rather be out of balance to the cost of process, right? And I super respect, there's a lot of competitors and great companies that crush the process, and the others come a little behind that. We're unapologetically sales and customers first, and that's core to who we are. But you bring up a great point. As you build, you need to balance that process. It's always kind of bringing it in, the word you use, into balance, because if you're too far out of whack in one way or the other, you won't remain successful moving forward.
Well, yeah, you've got to have consistency without the sacrifice of culture. I mean, I think that's really kind of where it gets down to
100%.
is, I mean, because you don't want to have cookie cutter operations. And as you said, the script and all of this. No, we'd like some consistency, but as you scale up, that's just the way it's got to be without sacrificing that culture.
That's the thing. And that's why, like, we will be attentive to processes, but it won't come at the cost of a town hall conversation about how that process you put in sucks and you should take it out, right? And then it's like, okay, you're right. We thought it was the right idea. It isn't. Let's try again. So I think really being respectful of culture first, and then underneath that, realizing that that doesn't mean that you can't have processes help you do your job better. They're not in conflict. They're in concert if you respect the relationship between the two and how they both fit. Best for your company.
Absolutely. Now, you all have a very aggressive growth goal. If I recall correctly, it was like 5 to 6 locations a year. That would scare the bejesus out of anybody who was really thinking about that, thinking, oh my God. But I think the big thing, Bill, is not only the acquisition, we could go all day about greenfield startup versus acquisitions and all of that, but you're going to have people. You're going to have to attract talent to fuel that growth. And that's a struggle unto itself.
It is. What we did was we started to open our own because there weren't just enough acquisitions and other ways to grow. So we started and we got on a flying wheel of opening 3 or 4 a year. And the way we found these locations is, in addition to the town halls, I do about 12 customer dinners a year. go into a market, just bring in the customers and say, hey, if you hear nothing else but thank you for your business, we've had a good night. But inevitably, you're going to share with us a lot more. So we ask them again, what's working, what's not? What would they like to see us? How's inventory? All the standard questions. But then a question we ask is, where would you like to see us?
Interesting. There you go.
Is there a market you'd like to see us in? And Jason, they give us the information. So we have over 40 locations in New England and upstate New York that have been generated from our customers suggesting us to be.
Perfect.
The example I always use is I was at a customer dinner in Burlington, Vermont 4 years ago now, always in the winter. Go to Burlington in the winter, you learn your stripes.
Yeah, totally. I've been there. I have been there.
So I'm like, hey, where would you like to see us? You got to come to Mo Vegas, man. I'm like, Mo Vegas? He's like, Morrisville, blow it up. So I get in the car and Google Morrisville, Vermont, because I never heard of it. I'm sure you haven't either. Or you've heard of Stowe, Vermont.
I have. I know where Stowe. Yeah, I know of Stowe. Yeah.
Me too. Morrisville's right next to Stowe. Okay. And contractors don't generally live in Stowe. They live in Morrisville, but they work in Stowe.
Very few can afford to live in resort town.
Correct. Now, from Morrisville, we had an inside salesperson in our Barry, Vermont branch named Reggie. And Reggie wanted to go home to Morrisville, where he's from, and open that supply house. So he's now done a great job there. That's another example. It says Granite Group over the door. It's Reggie's supply house in that market. He's a local kid. So the best part about these branch openings, so we've done 3 or 4. We've got them down now where we can do, takes about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And we can get them profitable usually in about 12 months. But the best part about it for me is the opportunities they provide for our people. So Reggie was able to step up and step into that role, and someone that needed to fill Reggie's role, right? So you're having this internal promotion for our people where everyone gets an opportunity to go back to that original conversation about becoming their own branch manager. So it's that huge career pathing for our people, and then watching our people step into these new markets and find success leading their own company, so to speak, and leading their own location. It's super powerful, and really it's the most satisfying part of it for me. To your point, you need to be fueling it with more and more people. So we have a trainee program where we try to fill anywhere from 6 to 10 people. You don't need to do anything about the industry. You just need to be able to willing to work hard. We'll teach you
have
business.
To backfill.
And in 12 to 18 months, we move you around a branch, we move you around a market. And then that person is either going to step in to backfill as Courtney goes and takes her new location. She just actually, the 50th location, Courtney was inside sales in Lowell for us forever. And now she is managing her own branch in Littleton, Mass, which is awesome. But then one of the trainees needs to step in for Courtney. So
that's fantastic.
It's kind of hopefully that flywheel and that thing we talk about building that durable growth engine for our people. And if you're commit to it and invest in it, coupled with the other thing it does, Jason, it attracts the right type of people. Because if someone's like, whoa, no, thank you. Like, then this isn't right for you, right? Because it's fast paced and it's stressful and it's a lot and it's moving. But if that dynamic environment appeals to you, then you're the right type of person that we're going to hopefully attract and bring in and move on and move up. So 5 or 6 is aggressive, but we're on pace for it. It's exciting when you're able to meet a customer need in a new market. It's exciting when you're able to meet a business need by opening a new market. And then super exciting when you're able to meet a cultural need by providing a career path for your people. It's something we've been on and we're going to continue to stay on.
It's admirable, really thinking about building that bench. This is something that I've watched a lot of companies struggle. I can't open a location. I can't do this because I don't have any bench players. And that's not a way to grow your business at all.
No, you have to invest in the bench. And then, for instance, we just had a conversation about this last week with our branch manager and a regional director in Massachusetts. We opened 2 branches in Massachusetts this past year. It's actually over the course of 12 months. Now they're stripped. That's it. They're done. They're tapped. We cannot open another one in that region for right now. But guess what? Northern New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, they're available. So we'll go and try to hopefully open around there. And then in 12, 18, 24 months, be back to Massachusetts. And hopefully by that time, they built that bench again. And those new trainees are now able to step on us. So by geographically rotating where you can, that's like a best case scenario. And then hopefully the real estate pops in the market you want it to. But you do have to be careful that you can't just put the foot down willy-nilly and just think you can do everything yesterday, because that's when you risk it falling apart. You have to be at least somewhat respectful of how much a different area, different branch, different region can handle. Some of our people would probably say I'm not as respectful of that as they would like me to be, and maybe slow it down a little bit.
Okay, hold on a sec, Bill. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
You've been a big advocate of attracting people to the distribution industry. I mean, we have a very fast-paced industry if you choose to jump in with both feet. But one of the things that I know that you are a huge advocate is bringing females into the industry. Can you talk a little bit about that and that effort?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, everywhere you read in corporate America, it's can't find people, can't find people, can't find people. Well, okay, if we're an industry that's only attractive to 49% of the population based on gender,
right?
We are fighting with more than one arm behind our back, right?
So, an arm and a thumb. It's gone.
Yeah. I mean, so it goes with it aligns with the trade that it's just generally not an area seen that females can be successful, which I reject as false. Some of our brightest, talented people are women and will continue to be in that area. So we have now female branch managers, female outside sales people. My entire finance team is led by women. Our CFO, our controller, our head of credit, all women, and they're all incredible at what they do. And I think as we struggle to find people overall, I think we do ourselves a disservice by not promoting the fact that this industry it is an incredible industry for women. And it's an incredible industry for people of color. Right. It's an incredible industry, period, for all people. And we need to do a better job of selling that overall and promoting that overall, but certainly to women who I think do provide some of the best leadership we have in this industry and will continue to as we hopefully attract more and more to it.
It just kind of reminds me back. So years and years ago, this is going way back when I had hair and all of that. I remember a regional manager in Washington. He would recruit female drivers. And he said they were so much more responsible. They weren't as hard on the vehicles. They would hit their times. So he would recruit female drivers. That was his way of bringing them in. And he didn't know really why he was doing that. He just felt, this is my experience and this is what, and frankly, out of that location, I remember that Washington region had way more female employees and associates in leadership positions than any of the other regions did. And that was probably just from that philosophy right at the very, very beginning. Traditionally, we might have said, oh, females can't drive for the truck. They can't lift all the things. They can't. Trust me, they did just fine.
I bet they did more than fine.
They did way better than guys. So,
no, to your point, though, you have to be intentional about that, too.
Yeah.
Because you're fighting an uphill battle of perception.
Yeah.
Right. It's not perceived to be an industry that is welcoming or open or a place where women can be successful. That's absolutely false. But you are fighting that perception. So you need to be even more intentional about how you look to seek and attract women to your team. And if you're able to do that, to your point, you're going to up your success by a factor of many.
Yeah. And that earlier point about only going after 49% of the population. We're out of our minds if we think we're going to be able to grow at the rate we want to.
100%.
Recently, you became the next president of ASA. And trust me, as a past president, that and $1.25 will get you a cup of coffee. But it is.
This is true.
It's a big commitment. I really applaud people who will raise their hand and do these things. And I know you've been involved not only with ASA, but with Commonwealth and some other organizations. First, tell me, why did you raise your hand? Why did you say, I want to be a part of this?
The single biggest reason is this is my industry. Yeah. This is our industry, right? It's not like we have another one. This is the one. And this is our industry association, be this or Hardy. So if you're a member of this industry and you see others raising their hand, I just feel when it's right for you, when you're able to balance it with your work life or your family life or what have you,
right?
I think it's incumbent upon you to serve your time as well as a viable member of the industry. It doesn't need to be at any certain level. It could be on a very local level. There's a lot of local chapters.
Yeah.
It could be on a national level. It could be within certain different groups or broader groups. There's a ton of different places to the kind of entry points where people are if they're just willing to raise their hand. And I think it's incumbent upon members of an industry to, when the time is right, say, this is my time to serve because others have done it before me and others will come after me who have stepped up and stepped on. And they're doing great work. The ASA is doing incredible work for its members. I always knew that, honestly, Jason, but I don't think I even really truly appreciated it until I became even more involved, right? And saw the incredible work that's being done for our members by that association on a daily basis. So when it's your time to serve, I think you raise your hand and you do it to the best of your abilities. And I would encourage anybody who's even considering it, that's the whole thing, just raise your hand. And it could be on a small thing or a larger thing or a small thing that becomes a larger thing. But by just raising your hand and being willing to be a member of your industry association is powerful. And it's a way of giving back to an industry that's given an awful lot to me and my family.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. It was a tremendously rewarding experience when I went through the ranks as well. And the relationships that I gained throughout that, that was over 20 years ago now. And I can call those people that were on the board and have a phenomenal conversation with them. And I probably haven't spoken to them for 10 plus years. That relationship's great.
Yeah, the networking, I've gotten to know wholesalers and manufacturers on a personal level that I just would not have known had I not done this. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a super important ancillary benefit of serving.
Yeah.
You get, and it's the ability to just pick up the phone and be like, hey, what are you doing about this? Because we see this as an issue. How have you solved it? Right. And over time, that person will be able to do the same with you. And you inevitably learn something when you hang up that phone too. So the networking and the connections you're able to make on a manufacturing and peer level is invaluable. I think you serve because it's the right thing to do when it's your time. That doesn't mean it can't be beneficial in so many ways. And you bring up one of the biggest ways of just creating those relationships on a national level.
And it's funny, my business partner today, he and I were in these committees 25 years ago. And we were on the board of directors at the same time. And he was president 2 years after I was. That is the type of close relationship that you create. And to this day, we're great friends and now business partners. And so
that's great.
It is. It's been a great ride. And I owe it back to that affiliation with my trade association. Again, say when somebody calls it, hey, would you be willing to? Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. And I think that's the big first step is, okay, I'll do it. Or be honest, my kids are young. No, but call me back in 3 years, because you have to balance it. We're all super busy with their jobs, super busy with their families.
Yeah.
And those things come first and they should. But if you can find a time that's right for you to carve out some additional time, I think you'll find, as you have and I have, that the time is both rewarding and very well spent.
And I think sometimes when people are maybe second generation, they don't have that in and everybody knows you as this person's kid. It could be a little daunting, be a little fearful about how do I get involved? And I try to tell people, if you reach out to an association, they will find something for you to do.
Oh my God, yes. Don't worry about that.
They will find something,
If you're having the remote inclination to do something, you don't even have to raise your hand fully. Just kind of sort of, and they'll find you and find something for you because they're starving for volunteers, right? They just aren't. So absolutely. I think if anyone's either intimidated or off-putted or not sure, just try it. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. But inevitably, I think you will, and it'll expand your network in a really positive way.
I've never met anybody who did not look favorably on their time that they spent with that. Absolutely. Well, hey, Bill, thanks for taking the time with me. I truly appreciate it. It's been fun kind of getting to know you a little bit better. And I look forward to the next time I get a chance to see you.
Same. Thanks for having me. It was really great. Really appreciate it, Jason.
All right. You bet.
Yeah, take it easy.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.